Alright, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, all the glory, all the honor unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Ruka, Kudash. Double honors goes out to the elder apostles of Great Millstone for teaching me the truth. Also want to acknowledge all the Akim who are pushing the truth with sincerity throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel. And this is Shabai from the GMS Denver. And I'm going to read Ecclesiasticus 19th chapter. It reads, "A laboring man that is given to drunkenness shall not be rich, and he that contemneth small things shall fall by little and little. Wine and women will make men of understanding to fall away, and he that cleaveth to harlots will become impudent." Okay. Let's see. Impudent. I always forget what that says. So, impudent, it means not showing due respect for another person. So, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to let these women rule over you. You know, especially in this time, you really, you're better off, just being single in this knowledge and this truth. Like the Apostle Paul said, you're going to have trouble in the flesh if you have a woman. I mean, you can do it, but, it's better to be in this knowledge without a woman, being single in this truth. What's it say? It says something about, let me see if I can get this precept. Let me see. Yeah, let's get this real quick. 1 Corinthians 7:33, it says, well, let's see. All right, I'll start at 32. 1 Corinthians 7:32, it says, "But I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to Yahweh, how he may please Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife." See? So by nature, if you have a wife, you're going to be, there's balance and brothers can do it. But by nature, you're going to be there to please your wife, But when you're not married, when you're unmarried, you're more apt to, focus and dial in and pleasing Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Okay? So let's go back to Ecclesiasticus 19:3. "Moth and worms shall have him to heritage, and a bold man shall be taken away. He that is hasty to give credit is light-minded, and he that sinneth shall offend against his own soul." Yeah, so you got to prove people, prove men, in this truth of ours. You don't just give somebody credit just because, you got to do it, after they're proven. It says, "And he that sinneth shall offend against his own soul," and that's you don't even have to break that down. You're literally offending your own soul when you're sinning. And sin, it'll wear on a person. It'll wear you down. That's why it's always, I was watching some brothers. I was watching a lot of the brothers today, different brothers from different camps, and they were in the spirit of, offending less, basically walking in the spirit more than in the flesh. Let's see. 5, it says, whoso taketh pleasure in wickedness shall be condemned, but he that resisteth pleasures crowneth his life. And this is a good verse for me to hear today for myself, first and foremost, because, you know, we get caught up in our lives. You know, we got to, you know, go to work. You know, you might have kids or children, you know, that you take care of, or, you know, whatever it is that you do in your daily routine. But you know, it's important to remember that when you resist pleasures, it's you know, it's like being made hard, being edified, suffering. You know, you know, they say you know, a boring life is a good life. You know, so that it's kind of like that. You know, if you're just always living for pleasure, like it says, you're going to be condemned. You know, look at that dude Eleazar. You know, he's a prime example of that. It says in verse 6, he that can rule his tongue shall live without strife, and he that hateth babbling shall have less evil. Right, so, you know, ruling your tongue. There's a scripture that talks about how the tongue is small, but it's so powerful, you know. If you can't rule your tongue, you know that you're going to be in lots of different bad situations, you know. And especially, you know, having, you know, you got to have the discernment to know when to speak and not when to speak. You see? So ruling your tongue is a big deal, man. Your tongue can get you in a lot of trouble. Let me see if I can. Let's see. It says, yeah, let's get this one. Proverbs 18:21. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. You see that? So that's how powerful your tongue is, man. The things you say, it can either bring you death or life. Like, you have these groups that are teaching, you know, unsound doctrine, breaking things down wrong, not accepting, you know, things that are of the scriptures, and they go on and teach and lead the flocks astray, and that's going to bring them death, you know, ultimately. Let's get this other one. Proverbs 21:23, it says, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. And we basically read that in Ecclesiasticus. You know, these scriptures, they line up. What King David said, through thy precepts I get understanding. You see? Let me read that again. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. You know? Let's keep reading over back in Ecclesiasticus 19. It says, oh yeah, let me read the last part of that. Well, I'll read 6. He that can rule his tongue shall live without strife, and he that hateth babbling shall have less evil. Right? And babbling goes into like gossip, and gainsaying. You know, you know, that's a characteristic of a woman. You know, if you're gossiping and babbling, you know, men. If you're a man of Yahweh Bashem Yoshai, you're not gonna entertain that type of shit. Verse 7. Rehearse not another that which is told unto thee, and thou shalt fare never the worse, whether it be friend or foe. Talk not of other men's lives, and if thou canst without offense reveal them not. There you go. You don't need to be speaking on other people's business. You stay in your lane. If it's something that needs to be brought to the attention of the camp or whatever, that's different. But overall, you're not going to be out here gossiping or concerning yourself with other men's matters. Again, that's an effeminate quality, like a woman. Women love to gossip. I think it's let me see if I can grab this. Let me see. Yeah, let's see. Proverbs again. Let's go back to Proverbs 18. In 8 it says, the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Right? And what's a talebearer? That's another word for a gossiper. Because when people are gossiping, it's usually they're talking shit about somebody else. So you don't want to be in that spirit, That's why the scriptures, hey, we're reading Ecclesiastes 19. It's always, it's always good to just, review, repeat, rinse and repeat, like they say with these scriptures, because, keeps us in line. Watching the brothers, watching the elders, puts us in our right mindset, man. Ecclesiastes 19 and where am I at? 8? No. 9. For he heard and observed thee, and when timeth cometh, he will hate thee. Right, that's if you're talking about someone else's matters, You're gonna create an enemy, We already have enough enemies. We got the heathen, the 2/3, That's just vanity. You get involved in gossiping and tale bearing and speaking on things that we don't need to speak on. Verse 10: if thou hast heard a word, let it die with thee, and be bold, it will not burst thee. There you go. So just because you hear something or know something, don't mean you got to be Mr. Big Mouth, You just let it die with you. If it's not gonna, it's not gonna, or I should say, it's not gonna hurt you to just shut the fuck up and not pass it on like rumors and vain talking and babbling and gossiping, tale bearing. Just let shit die, man. If it doesn't pertain to this knowledge and this truth, it's not really even worth mentioning or repeating, That goes really for anything outside of this truth. Verse 11: a fool travaileth with a word as a woman in a labor of a child. You see? As an arrow that sticketh in a man's thigh, so is a word within a fool's belly, You're just adding insult to injury with words. Remember, it goes back to controlling the tongue, It's not going to kill you to just, somebody, you hear something about someone or something about someone. It's not going to kill you to just let it die with you. You don't need to be passing on whether it's true or not. Like I say, we should be focused on this knowledge and this truth than sitting here, gainsaying and babbling and vain talk. We got bigger fish to fry. All right, verse 13. Admonish a friend, it may be he hath not done it. And if he hath done it, that he do it no more. Right? Let's see. Yeah, so ain't nothing wrong with rebuking, confronting, telling somebody, you can. It's manly to do this. Admonish a friend, to rebuke a brother if it's necessary, And like it says here, if he did it, well, let's read it again. It may, if he did something and you rebuke him, and you say, let me read it. Admonish thy friend, and friend is another word for brother. It may be he hath not said it, and if he have, that he speak it not again. So if you rebuke someone or rebuke a brother, maybe he didn't say or do what you're rebuking him, or if you're on a hunch, or you just rebuke a brother through the Spirit. And guess what? If he has done it, he won't do it again. And that's it's more honorable to rebuke someone than to sit there and talk behind their back, or tell rumors about them or spread gossip about them. Like I said, that's a feminine quality. That's something that women do. And again, it ain't gonna hurt you just to let it die with you. If you know something that ain't worth repeating, just keep it on. Keep it to yourself. Verse 16: There is one that slippeth in his speech, but not from his heart. And who is he that hath not offended with his tongue? Right, and you don't want to be slipping with your speech. That's why it's always good to just be, like I say, dialed in, zoned in on this knowledge, zoned in on the truth. I was watching the brothers in Kansas City, right, from the Kansas City camp, and they were kind of going in on this topic. That's what inspired me to do this lesson. But one of the brothers had said, the Lord has a funny way of putting a man's foot in his own mouth, So, we got to be on point, We got to, this is a time of, we're getting close down to the wire, down to the last stretch, if you will. So it's always good just to tighten the ship, All the camps, we should all be tightening the ship right now, And I speak, about our camp first and foremost, and especially myself first and foremost, you see, because Lord knows we all need to, get better. Verse 18, the fear of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai is the first step to be accepted of him, and wisdom obtaineth his love. So, hey, when you do fuck up, when you do sin, repent, have that genuine fear. And brothers know when we're fearful of Yahweh. Excuse me. When we're fearful of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. In your spirit, Most of the time, brothers, our spirits, if you're sincere in this knowledge and this truth, your spirit will check you before any of the brothers can, But, this is the first step of this wisdom that we get is really fearing Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. Verse 19, the knowledge of the commandments and of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai is the doctrine of life. And they that do things that please him shall receive the fruit of the tree of immortality. Right? So walking in the Spirit, brothers, and again, it goes for me first and foremost, because we've all had our moments of, weakness or moments in the flesh. But, if we're walking in the Spirit, it's gonna bring that fruit, that immortality, that crown, like we read a little earlier. And honestly, the Lord has a way of doing things, because he'll when you walk in the flesh, the Lord will vex you. He'll put something in front of you that just vexes the shit out of your soul, and Lord willing, cause you to walk in that Spirit and be mindful of it. Because sometimes we're in these hamster wheel lives, where everything is the same thing. You're just running in that hamster wheel, getting nowhere. But in reality, the ones who are getting somewhere are the brothers who are in this knowledge and this truth. We have to suffer. We have to go through all the bullshit daily. We have to endure. We get worn out. Like it tells you in Daniel 7:25. We're the saints who get worn out here in Babylon, and it does, man. This knowledge, this truth, can be a burden, And so we have to learn to to be like not only in the Spirit, but be those stoic men, because if you become that Epicurean, hey, I promise you, your soul is going to get vexed if you're sincere. If you're that you've got that Epicurean spirit and not a Stoic spirit, man, you're going to be you're going to get vexed in your soul. And why would we, I mean, I understand we do these things, we walk in the flesh, and you do things for pleasure. It turns out afterwards you start feeling guilty or bad, or like we just read, he that lives for pleasure, let me read it again in verse 5. Whoso taketh pleasure in wickedness shall be condemned, but he that resisteth pleasures crowneth his life. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, and for Jake, we love women, so when you can become, when you can resist women and get on that level, and I'm not saying this is what brothers need to do, you resist women, but the point I'm making is, that's a pleasure that Jake men, we all love that. That's, aside from, this knowledge, this truth, the woman's, pretty high up there on the pleasure, on the pleasure side, you know what I'm saying? But if you can get that point where you have that self-control, because you deal with these women, you do shit that you normally wouldn't do, spending money, fucking